鳥を羨ましいと思ったことはない？
人にも物にも天分ってものがあるんだよ、キノ。モトラドも人間も空を飛ぶようにはできていない。
人は誰でも空を行く鳥を見るとさ、旅に出たくなるそうだ。
With an insatiable lust for exploring the world, Kino rides on a trusty motorcycle Hermes, meeting new people and gets acquainted with their customs. However, Kino's journey is not a story about sightseeing, but rather the thought-provoking encounters she makes along the way. Kino is the main character of our show. While young at age, she certainly knows how to protect herself. A vital skill for those that want to explore the world. Given how cool-headed Kino appears to be, it's not always easy to guess what she thinks. Some might say that her behavior is a little bit too laid back at times. But as the story progresses, we do not only get a better grasp of her past, making her behavior more reasonable, but also see that she is still emotionally affected by her journey. Her reactions just aren't as exaggerated like in most anime shows. On her travels, she's accompanied by her motorcycle. Well, duh, of course, but the catch being that her motorcycle Hermes actually comments about Kino's encounters. Hermes' snarky remarks actually balance out quite well with Kino's personality. While this duo is an interesting bunch in itself, the real star of the show is less its protagonist and more the diverse places we as the viewer get to observe. With the exception of one 2-part episode, each episode consists of a new place Kino encounters. It means Kino's journey follows an episodic format, which does not follow up on the events of a previous episode. These chapters are cherry-picked from the light novel series that was adapted into the anime. Since these stories are the meat of the show, the question arises whether they actually succeed in portraying an interesting world. The short answer being, yeah, they surely do, for the most part that is. As always for episodic shows, it's not easy to judge everything as just one entity, since there are bound to be some episodes that just aren't as good as the other ones. Kino's journey is about the possibilities of how humans could or have lived together. This involves themes such as religion, politics and human rights. While this may sound a bit tough to sit through, this anime manages quite well to tell somewhat simple tales with a fair bit of depth behind them, bringing us an interesting premise almost every time. That is, if you can stomach the rather dark tone. Inventions that have seemed great at first turned out to be horrible instead. People that are apparently quite nice are actually very wicked inside. The key phrase here being common sense. A tradition that worked in one land may objectively be a horror scenario for most people that haven't been brought up with this particular kind of mindset. Rarely do these chapters conclude in a positive fashion. However, these tragic short stories are actually quite captivating, since they don't resort to cliches and can actually be taken seriously. All the while, Kino's journey has a tranquil atmosphere, a welcoming change to the hyperactive shows anime usually has to offer nowadays. In that regard, it's not a surprise that the soundtrack is more subdued and melancholic. Kino's journey has still more elements that might be worth discussing, like Hermes' ability to talk, which may or not be a fabrication of her own mind, maybe even her unspoken feelings, or Kino's possible gender confusion as she talks in a very masculine manner. But for this video alone, I intend to cover the question whether the anime Kino's journey is something you might wanna check out. Well, let's just bring it down to what's good, what's bad, and what's just up to taste. Good points are obviously the strong female protagonist, gender confusion aside for now. We've got interesting stories that don't resort to cliches. A still rather unexplored setting, being the road trip genre kinda. A fitting soundtrack to further strengthen the good atmosphere the show got for itself. But of course there are also some bad parts, like as you have seen, the show looks quite outdated and is rather simple in terms of art and animation, I would say even for its time. Not all the episodes are as good as the other ones. Unfortunately, in particular episode 1, which is just a bit too long for its own good. 6 and 7, that being as the only 2-parter doesn't flow so well as the other ones. And episode 8, that's just kinda nice. So now more importantly, what's up to taste? Who's the show made for? For once we have the episodic format, we have like no progression really going on between these episodes, just pretty cool short stories in between basically. And of course this show is just quite dark most of the time. If that ain't your cup of tea, then I'm sorry, the show probably isn't for you. Lastly, we have Kino herself. who is more of a passive protagonist. She rarely gets into action, she's more of an observer. Regardless of your own preferences, Kino's Journey is still one of my favorite shows, even after all this time. I'd love to recommend it to just about anyone that just wants to watch a good show. In terms of road trip anime, some of you might be already thinking of Mushishi, that has a very similar premise, with the exception of the stories being rooted in Japanese folklore and the main character actually being a tool to solve issues rather than just observing a situation. If you like Kino's Journey, you might wanna take a look at Mushishi as well, and obviously vice versa. At the end, I would love to give a quick shout out to the Tumblr blog Kino's Novel Shelf, that has a pretty good repertoire of the Kino's novels and all the available soundtracks. With that said, thanks for watching this first try of creating this new format of mine, and I hope this gave you some insight as to whether you should check out Kino's Journey.